Alien, one of the greatest horror movies of all time, started out as a comedy. With Alien Romulus hitting theaters this weekend, here's some things I bet you never knew about the 1979 original. The story of Alien starts at USC Film School in 1970, when students Dan O'Bannon and John Carpenter, yes, that John Carpenter, made the science fiction comedy film Dark Star. The movie included an alien made from a beach ball and rubber claws that was entirely played for laughs. But this experience left O'Bannon with the desire to make an alien that looked real. And a few years later, he began writing a new version of the story, but as a horror film this time. He brought on Ron Shusett as a collaborator, and the two share story credits on the film. O'Bannon got through about 29 pages of a screenplay he was calling Memory, when he got hired to work on Alejandro Jodorowsky's adaptation of Dune. That project eventually fell through, but in the process, O'Bannon became familiar with the works of H.R. Giger. Quote, "His paintings had a profound effect on me. I had never seen anything that was quite as horrible and at the same time as beautiful as his work. And so I ended up writing a script about a Giger monster." After Dune, O'Bannon was homeless and broke, so he was crashing on Shussett's couch. He went back to writing Memory, hoping it would be something that a studio would buy. And at one point, the title was Star Beast. But O'Bannon didn't like it, and he picked Alien instead. It was Shusett who came up with a crew member being implanted with an alien embryo that would then burst out of him. O'Bannon was inspired by a number of other science fiction stories, including The Thing from Another World, Forbidden Planet, and Planet of the Vampires. He later said, "I didn't steal Alien from anybody. I stole it from everybody." When the script was done, Shusett and O'Bannon pitched it to the studios as Jaws in space. They were going to sell it to Roger Corman, but then they got connected with Gordon Carroll, David Giler, and Walter Hill, who had a production company called Brandywine that was tied to 20th Century Fox. Giler and Hill did a number of rewrites on the movie and added the android character of Ash. At first, Fox wasn't keen on making a science fiction film, but then Star Wars hit really big for them in 1977, and suddenly they were in desperate need of another science fiction movie. And Alien was the only one they had in development. Fox greenlit the movie with a $4.2 million budget. O'Bannon thought at first that he was going to direct, but then Fox asked Hill to direct. Hill passed, and then Fox considered Peter Yates, John Borman, Jack Clayton, Robert Aldrich, and Robert Altman. But the writers and Brandywine didn't think these directors would take the movie seriously enough. They were impressed instead with Ridley Scott's debut feature, The Duelists, and so they offered Alien to him, and he accepted. During pre-production, Ridley Scott made storyboards so impressive that Fox doubled the movie's budget. Around this time, O'Bannon introduced Scott to the works of H.R. Giger, and they decided that Necronom 4 should be their Alien. They wanted Fox to hire Giger as designer on the movie, but the studio thought his art was too frightening and morbid. Still, they persisted with the backing of the producers, and eventually won out. The facehugger was the first thing that Giger designed specifically for Alien. The chestbuster was inspired by Francis Bacon's 1944 painting, Three Studies for Figures at the Base of a Crucifixion. And Dan O'Bannon said his experiences with Crohn's disease inspired the chestbuster scene. For the full Alien, Giger went through a number of iterations and designs, improving upon Necronom 4. Casting Alien was an interesting process because the script explicitly didn't gender the spaceship crew, which freed up Scott and the casting directors to cast a wide net. They were specifically looking for average-looking people, quote, truckers in space, and much of the cast ended up being older than typical sci-fi stars at the time, all of which added to the film's relatability and sense of realism. Tom Skerritt was first approached before the movie had a director, but he declined. Then when Ridley Scott was hired and the budget increased, he came on board. John Finch was initially going to play Kane, but he got sick on the first day of shooting and was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which led to John Hurt taking his place. Hurt would later get nominated for a BAFTA for the role. Meryl Streep was considered for the role of Ripley, but they never actually went out to her because her boyfriend John Cazale had recently passed away. Helen Mirren auditioned for the part, and Sigourney Weaver had never been the lead in a movie prior to Alien. She was mostly known for her theater work at the time, and she was one of the last people cast in the film. But her audition really impressed Ridley Scott and the producers, and so she landed her first ever lead role. She'd also get nominated for a BAFTA. Harry Dean Stanton started off his audition saying, "I don't like sci-fi or monster movies," but Ridley Scott convinced him to take the part, saying it would be more like a thriller. Balaji Badejo played the Xenomorph. This 6'10", 26-year-old was a design student at the time, and he was discovered in a bar by a member of the casting team. He took Tai Chi and mime classes to create convincing movements for the character. Filming began on July 5th, 1978 at Pinewood Studios and Shepperton Studios in London. And it took a crew of 200 people to build the movie's 3 sets: the planet's surface, the Nostromo, and the derelict alien spacecraft. Art director Roger Christian used a lot of scrap metal to build the set and props to save money, which was a technique he learned while working on Star Wars. The Nostromo's decks were connected via practical hallways made with parts of scrapped bomber aircrafts, and mirrors were used to make the corridors seem longer than they actually were. The company the crew works for is never stated in the script, but concept artist Ron Cobb put the name Weyland-Yutani in the sets and props. It was meant to imply a joint British and Japanese company. The name took and became a big part of the Alien franchise lore for decades to come. The spacesuits the actors wear in the movie were super bulky and had no cooling system and vent at first. So the actors exhaled carbon dioxide could get out. And because there was also a heat wave happening while they were shooting, this caused the actors to nearly pass out, and the production had to keep nurses on hand with oxygen tanks. There's an exterior shot in the movie that shows the Nostromo's landing leg, and at first Ridley Scott didn't think it looked big enough. So instead of the regular cast, he put some of the crew members' young children in the spacesuits to make the set look bigger. And the kids also nearly fainted due to the heat of the suits. Like on Star Wars, models and miniatures were used to film the spaceships and planets from space. The effects crew also used matte paintings to fill in areas of the ship's interior and planet's surface. H.R. Giger designed the alien ship to be organic and biomechanical, contrasting the Nostromo's industrial design. The set that has that dead space jockey, as it later became called, was made as big as the budget would allow to impress the audience, but it only had one wall, and Giger actually airbrushed the entire set himself by hand. The egg was made of fiberglass, and its innards were a cow's stomach and tripe. The facehugger that emerges from the egg was made of sheep's intestine. Light effects in the egg chamber were created with lasers borrowed from the English rock band The Who. They were rehearsing on a soundstage next door. For the chestbuster scene, the actors knew a creature would be bursting out of the chest, but they were not aware of the fake blood that would be coming out as well. The scene was shot in one take with a puppeteer underneath pushing the alien through, and the reaction you see from the actors is real and genuine because of the amount of blood, a lot of which hit Veronica Cartwright, and that's why she has such an intense reaction. The creature is then able to run off because they had cut a slit in the table. The chestbuster scene later became called one of the most memorable moments in movie history. In 2022, IGN named it number 10 on its list of the 100 best movie moments of all time. The dead facehugger the crew examines in the film was made with pieces of fish and shellfish. For the scene where Ash is revealed to be an android, a puppet was created of his torso and upper body. And then his innards were made with milk, caviar, fiber optics, and urinary catheters. That scene reportedly made an usher faint at a preview screening. For the scene where it's just his head on a table, Ian Holm was kneeling under the table. As for the adult alien, the head had 900 moving parts and points of articulation, and parts of a real human jaw were used in its construction. And also, a lot of KY jelly was used for its saliva and slimy coating. Ridley Scott intentionally hid the alien's full body for most of the movie to build suspense. Like I said, Jaws in space. The movie was originally supposed to end with the destruction of the Nostromo and Ripley escaping in the shuttle. But then, Ridley Scott came up with a fourth act in which Ripley has to confront the alien on the shuttle. And he actually convinced Fox to give him more money to do it. The final budget on Alien was $11 million. Scott also wanted the alien to bite Ripley's head off and make the final log entry in her voice. But the producers nixed that idea, deciding the alien should die at the end. The movie wrapped shooting on October 21st after just 14 weeks. Fox did a number of preview screenings in the spring of 1979 and used the legendary tagline, "In space, no one can hear you scream." The movie opened at first in a limited release on May 25th, 1979, playing just 91 theaters total. It did $3.5 million opening weekend. Alien didn't have a formal premiere, but people lined up for blocks to see it at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood. And the studio displayed models, sets, and props from the movie outside the theater as part of its promotion. And apparently some people set fire to the space jockey, saying it was a work of the devil. The movie would then expand into a wide release on June 22nd, and there's actually some debate about how much money it's made total. The number says to date it's grossed $187 million, while Box Office Mojo says $108 million. Some of the reason for that is because Fox intentionally hid how much the money made because it didn't want to pay Brandywine any of the profits. Fox actually said in Alien's first year it lost $2 million, and that it didn't want to make a sequel. Brandywine later sued Fox over these shady business dealings, and eventually they settled when Fox agreed to make a sequel. Critics were mixed on Alien when it first first came out. Time Out called it an empty bag of tricks. It later went through a lot of critical reappraisal, and today 93% of the 202 reviews assessed by Rotten Tomatoes are positive. The movie would be nominated for 2 Oscars, Best Visual Effects and Best Art Direction. It won the former. It was also nominated for 7 BAFTAs, winning 2, and the score was nominated for a Golden Globe and Grammy. The movie would go on to make more than $40 million from VHS and Betamax rentals, and in 2008, AFI said it was the 8th best sci-fi movie of all time. In 2021, Sci-Fi said it was the second scariest sci-fi movie, behind The Thing, and Alien has had significant cultural impact over the years. It was parodied in Spaceballs, and it heavily influenced Metroid. Also, Eli Roth says it's his primary influence. In 2019, students at North Bergen High School in New Jersey went viral with their very low-budget stage adaptation of the movie. Ridley Scott sent them a letter of congratulation, and Sigourney Weaver herself attended an encore performance. Alien, of course, spawned a massive franchise now spanning 9 films total, including 2 spin-off movies where the xenomorph went up against Predator, and there are dozens of video games across every platform. And after Alien Romulus, which comes out in theaters this weekend, a TV series spin-off is also in the works from Noah Hawley at FX and Hulu.